All the way along the torch's slow and painful route, the demonstrators charged and the police countercharged, sometimes firing pepper spray into the crowd. This was not the public relations event that the Chinese had wanted. Few of these scenes will be shown on Chinese state television because of censorship. Pro-Tibet supporters scaled the Eiffel Tower, France's most famous landmark, despite huge security. And the flame itself was extinguished at least twice, as the torch had to be put on a bus out of harm's way. The torch's progression through Paris has been as chaotic as it was through London 24 hours earlier. These anti-Chinese protesters are claiming a major victory against what they see as Beijing propaganda. On the streets of Paris, calls for an Olympic boycott grew.
We want to show the world that we are not agreeing with the things that China is doing on Tibet, and we want to free Tibet, and that's why we are here.
There is no human rights, so they are destroying our country, our culture, our religion and everything.
The torch relay fell hours behind schedule. The Chinese personnel on board the accompanying vehicles look bewildered. The French government insists they are not condoning Chinese repression, simply supporting Olympic ideals. But that's not the way the Tibetan community here sees it.
We are here under counter demonstration against Chinese Olympic torch, which is a torch of shame, crime, blood. Because the Chinese authority, communist government, exercise military crackdown against Tibetan civil population, which reclaim only freedom and justice.
Police had expected trouble, but the scale of the anger from young and old took them by surprise. Tim Friend, Al Jazeera, Paris.
And Tim can join us now live from the French capital. So Tim, update us with the latest. Where is the torch now?
Well, Felicity, it's still en route. It should have reached its destination at the city's main athletic stadium by now, because although it had fallen behind schedule because of all the protests, the organisers, at the request of the Chinese authorities, had actually removed some of the ceremonies that were going to take place and some of the speeches that were going to take place on the way to its final destination. So even though they've shortened the route, it still hasn't arrived on schedule. And not content with scaling the Eiffel Tower and putting up a big poster, the latest we're hearing is that the protesters have now managed to unfurl a banner over Notre Dame Cathedral here in the centre of Paris, a very sacred place and also a big Parisian landmark. So despite the huge amount of security, and earlier today someone in the police was saying to me, you know, this is a bigger amount of security than we had for George Bush's visit. Well, maybe it is, but it didn't succeed in stopping the protesters getting through. And earlier on, I was down on the street amongst the protesters. Our eyes were stinging because of the pepper spray that the anti-riot police were having to use on occasions just to keep order.
Tim, do you think it's fair to say that they have been somewhat surprised in Paris, the authorities, by the strength and the size of these demonstrations?
Yes, I think they have. I think the difference perhaps between what's happened today in Paris and what happened yesterday in London, in London it was the protesters were vociferous, they made their point, but here I think the anti-Chinese sentiment, the concern about the Olympics is much more widespread. For instance, the mainstream political parties are concerned. The town hall, the city hall, had a poster up. It wasn't exactly a protest poster, but it kind of made a point about equality and freedom. And also the athletes themselves have been wearing little pins on their lapels, very discreet ones, saying fairness for all, quoting actually one of the Olympic charters, but it also makes the point as well, if you read this into it at least, against Chinese repression.